I was supposed to be enjoying Thanksgiving, but instead, I sat hunched over the kitchen counter, my college textbooks scattered around the house like a bad omen. Finals were looming, and my brain was fried, but there was something else, something in the air that made it hard to breathe. I glanced over at my stepmother, Melissa. She was at the stove, stirring the mashed potatoes like it was a chore, her back stiff, her movements precise, but cold. I never could read her well, but today, something about her felt off, like she was holding her breath, waiting for something to happen. And my dad, Mark, was barely even here. For the third time today, he'd retreated to his office, shutting the door behind him with a soft click that always made me uneasy. He'd been distant for weeks now, but I still couldn't shake the image of him as my protector, my idol, even if I had begun to see cracks in that image. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, trying to focus, but the tension was unbearable. Then my phone buzzed. "Leave the house. Don't tell anyone what you hear." My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the message, wondering if it was some prank, but it felt too real. My gut twisted. I glanced out the window. A black car sat parked across the street, unmoving. It had been there for hours. Maybe I was just paranoid. But something told me it wasn't a coincidence. I shook my head. This was stupid. Nothing was happening. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to focus on the dinner prep, my mind circling back to my dad. I wanted to believe it was just stress from work. His business was always demanding. But there were too many little things I couldn't ignore. The phone calls he took in low, urgent tones. The weird requests. My social security number, my bank accounts. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. But what if I wasn't? My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced down, barely able to steady my hands as I unlocked the screen. FBI agents are in position. Move now. My stomach dropped. My breath caught. What the hell was happening? The house felt too loud all of a sudden. The clink of silverware against plates, the hum of the refrigerator, the sizzle of something in the oven. Everything felt so sharp, like my senses were dialed up too high. I stood there, frozen for a second, my brain scrambling to make sense of the words. I was supposed to run, but where? How? And who was I supposed to trust? My dad appeared at the kitchen door, looking every bit like the man I used to think I knew. He was dressed in his usual work clothes, a navy blazer that looked expensive, and a crisp white shirt. He gave me a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dinner's almost ready," he said. His voice was flat, but it didn't surprise me. He'd been like this lately, distant. Even when he was here, he wasn't really here. I nodded, not sure what to say. The tension in the room felt thick enough to cut with a knife. I turned back to the counter, trying to focus on the potatoes I was mashing. It was hard to concentrate with everything swirling in my head. I could hear my Aunt Lynn's laugh from the dining room, too loud, too carefree, and my cousin Eva's voice complaining about some stupid thing. Uncle Carl was talking about his golf game, his usual boring chatter, while the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. My dad was still talking. "Business trip in the morning," he said, his voice carrying from the doorway. "I'll be gone a few days." I paused, trying to catch the details. Business trip? He never mentioned anything about it. He was always so meticulous about keeping his plans straight, but he didn't seem prepared now. No mention of where he was going, no mention of what for. I glanced at him, studying his face for any signs of hesitation, but all I saw was the same mask he'd been wearing for months. Then I heard it, another buzz from my phone. I snatched it up, feeling my pulse quicken. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, my heart racing. I glanced at Melissa, my stepmother, who was standing at the stove, stirring the pot a little too aggressively. Something was off about her, too. The way she kept glancing at my dad's office like she was waiting for something. Her movements were too sharp, too controlled, like she was holding herself together by a thread. "What's going on?" I asked quietly, as I leaned against the counter, trying to sound casual. Melissa looked up, her eyes wide for a second before she forced a smile. "Nothing, honey. Just tired." You know how it is, her smile didn't reassure me. It only made me more uneasy. I felt like I was sinking. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. The buzzing of my phone. The way everyone else seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. And I was in the middle of it. I wanted to call someone, to ask what the hell was going on, but who could I trust? The message from the unknown number? The black car parked outside? The strange looks from my dad? From Melissa? I didn't know who was playing a game and who was telling the truth, but my gut was screaming at me to get out of there, to run, to hide, before it was too late. I stepped away from the counter, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I needed to see what was going on outside. I slid the blinds open just enough to peek through, trying not to be noticed. There were men, at least 5 of them, walking in a group down the street. They were dressed in dark clothes, not quite like joggers or just regular pedestrians. They moved with purpose, scanning the houses, their heads turning in unison like they were searching for something or someone. Too organized to be random, my pulse kicked into overdrive. This wasn't a coincidence. The buzzing of my phone nearly made me jump out of my skin. I pulled it out, hands shaking, my stomach twisting. "We have everything. Don't warn anyone. Get to your room immediately." I read it over twice, just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Get to your room. What did that mean? What the hell was happening? I backed away from the window, the room suddenly feeling too small. I started pacing, trying to breathe through the dizziness creeping up my spine. Then, everything clicked. Why did he need to know those things? Why had he been so insistent, even when I didn't see the point? I froze in place, the full weight of it crashing down on me. Was he setting me up for something? Or was this something much worse? My mind spun faster than I could catch up with. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a pawn in some game I didn't understand. And if it was a game, I was playing the wrong side. I looked around, almost like I was expecting to find something, anything, that would make sense of this madness. But there was nothing, just the low hum of the oven, the click of silverware as my Uncle Carl cut into his turkey, and the too loud laughter from my cousin Eva. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned to Melissa, who was stirring the gravy with a tight expression that didn't match the holiday spirit. "Melissa, is everything okay?" I asked, my voice betraying the anxiety twisting in my gut. She shot me a quick glance, her eyes darting toward the hallway before quickly looking back at the stove. "Everything's fine, honey, just tired." Her voice was too high-pitched, too quick. She wasn't fooling me. I pressed, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "You sure? You're acting kind of—" I said everything's fine, she interrupted sharply, turning the spoon in the gravy pot with a force that almost splashed over the edge. "Just get the table set, okay?" I didn't say anything more, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. Something was definitely wrong, and it wasn't just me being paranoid. I turned back toward the living room where my dad was talking to Uncle Carl in his usual business tone. But something was off. The conversation didn't make sense. "Yeah, I'll be gone for a few days." Business stuff. Big deal? My dad's voice carried over to me, but his words didn't match the way he was talking. There was something in the air, a kind of urgency to his tone that didn't fit the casual nature of the subject. Business? What business? He'd been quiet about what he actually did for work lately. I used to know all the details, the clients, the projects. Now I barely knew the basics. I tried to calm myself down, to reason my way out of the panic rising in my chest. But when I looked at my dad, all I saw was a stranger, someone I didn't recognize anymore. And I wasn't sure if I even wanted to anymore. Another buzz from my phone. My heart leapt. I couldn't stop myself from looking at it. "Don't trust anyone." The words were simple, but they hit me like a slap in the face. I'd been trying to push away the nagging feeling in my gut, but now it was undeniable. Something was happening here, and I had no idea what it was. But I could feel the danger getting closer. I thought about the men outside, about my dad's odd behavior, about Melissa's nervous energy. What if I wasn't just being paranoid? What if everything was about to fall apart? I backed away from the phone, my hand trembling. I couldn't trust my dad anymore. I couldn't even trust Melissa. I had no idea who I could trust. The whole world felt like it was tipping, and I was standing on the edge, waiting to fall. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I stayed silent. I had to stay quiet. I had to figure out what was going on. The clock was ticking. I had no idea what was about to happen, but deep down, I knew I didn't have much time to figure it out. Dinner had started, but it felt like I was sitting at the table with strangers. The usual hum of conversation was muffled in my ears, and the clinking of silverware against plates sounded distant. My dad was laughing with my Uncle Carl about some old business deal, and Melissa kept looking at her watch, like she was waiting for something. My phone was on the table, buzzing in my pocket like a warning bell. I couldn't focus on anything else, couldn't ignore the way the air felt heavy around me. My fingers itched to grab the phone, but I couldn't just leave the table. If I did, it would look suspicious, even though everything in me screamed that I needed to leave. I tried to make small talk, but it felt like I was speaking through a fog. "So, Eva, how's school going?" I asked my cousin, just to keep up the illusion of normalcy. "It's fine," she said, not looking up from her plate. "Same as always." I nodded, not really listening. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest I thought everyone would hear it. Then my phone buzzed again. This time I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it off the table and slipped it under the tablecloth, hoping no one saw. The number was blocked. I pressed it to my ear, my breath catching. "Hello?" My voice felt thin, shaky. A woman's voice came through the line, calm but urgent. "Tessa Johnson." "Yeah, this is Tessa," I whispered, glancing up at my dad, making sure he wasn't looking. "This is Special Agent Sarah Daniels from the FBI. We don't have much time, but I need you to listen carefully." The words hit me like a punch. FBI. My head spun. What do you mean? What's going on? I could barely get the words out. "Your father, Mark Johnson, is involved in illegal activities. Money laundering, fraud, and potentially worse. You've been unknowingly used by him as part of his operation." I felt like I had been slapped. My mind raced, but everything was slow, like I was underwater. "What are you talking about? My dad? He wouldn't," Agent Daniels interrupted, her tone firm. "I understand this is a lot to process, but I need you to stay calm. You're in immediate danger. Your father has been using you, your identity, your information. He's been setting you up, and we're moving in to stop him." I barely heard her last words. My brain couldn't process what she was saying. My dad, the man I looked up to, the man I thought could do no wrong, involved in this? The betrayal hit so deep, I could barely breathe. I started, but my voice faltered. I didn't know if I could trust this woman. I didn't know if I could trust anyone. Could I believe her? Or was this some elaborate trick? "Listen to me, Tessa," she said, her voice sharp. "You need to leave the house, right now. We're moving in, and your father may try to stop you. He might call you downstairs. Don't go. Don't trust him." I glanced at the door leading to the stairs, my heart racing. My father was downstairs, somewhere in that house, maybe just waiting for me to walk right into whatever trap he'd set. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I was frozen. After the raid began, the messages stopped coming. The chaos was too loud now, and I couldn't focus on anything else. "Stay quiet, stay hidden, and don't tell anyone what's going on. We're on our way. Do you understand?" Agent Daniels pressed. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I understand." I hung up without saying goodbye, the weight of the words sinking in. I had no idea what to do. My father was a criminal? How was I supposed to believe that? Everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. My stomach twisted in knots. I looked around the table at my family. They were all eating, laughing, oblivious to the world crashing down around me. My dad and uncle were deep in conversation. My Aunt Lynn was talking about something with Eva, and Melissa was still stirring the gravy, her movements stiff and jerky. She wasn't even looking at me. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my glass of water. It splashed across the table, the cold liquid making my skin prickle. I'm not feeling well," I stammered, trying to sound casual even though every fiber of my being was screaming for me to run. I didn't wait for anyone to answer. I turned and walked quickly toward the stairs, my legs shaking. As soon as I was out of the room, I rushed upstairs, my heart pounding harder than I thought possible. I shut the door behind me, locked it, and pressed my back against it, trying to steady my breath. My thoughts were a mess, everything in my mind swirling like a tornado. What was real? What was a lie? I pulled my phone out again, but this time I couldn't bring myself to check it. Not yet. I couldn't go downstairs. I couldn't trust my dad. I couldn't trust Melissa. I couldn't trust anyone. The silence in the house pressed in on me, and for the first time, I truly felt alone. I barely had a moment to catch my breath before I heard the unmistakable sound of my dad's voice from downstairs, loud and clear. "Tessa, come downstairs and join us, kiddo. Dinner's getting cold." I froze. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I felt like my body had turned to stone. I should have gone upstairs the second I got that phone call, the second Agent Daniels told me to stay hidden. But now, my dad was calling me down, probably just a few feet away from whatever chaos was about to unfold. The instinct to run, to escape, was so strong, it nearly made my legs give out beneath me. But I remembered Agent Daniels' voice, sharp and clear. "Don't go downstairs. Don't trust him." I couldn't go down there, but I couldn't just stay in my room either, pretending I hadn't heard. I needed a plan. I stood up, walking to the door with what I hoped was a steady enough pace to keep anyone from questioning me. My hand was shaking as I grabbed the door handle. I had to leave the room, but I couldn't stay still. My brain was on fire. I cracked the door open slightly and peeked down the hall. Nothing seemed off, just the usual stillness of the house. I quickly stepped out, taking a deep breath. Then I forced myself to take a few steps toward the stairs, pretending I'd heard nothing. I almost laughed at the ridiculousness of it all. How was I supposed to act normal? I couldn't even remember how to be normal right now. Just before I stepped on the first step, I heard the front door crash open downstairs with a violent thud that made my entire body flinch. It was followed by shouting, angry, authoritative voices, all yelling the same thing. "FBI, freeze!" My heart shot into my throat. My legs went weak, and I grabbed the banister to steady myself, my whole body trembling as the reality of the situation slammed into me. The FBI was here. I didn't dare move. I didn't want to breathe too loudly. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, but in my mind, it was moving too fast. I wanted to run to the window to see what was going on, but I couldn't. I couldn't risk making a sound. Another set of shouts echoed through the house, but this time, they were mixed with the sound of things being knocked over, doors slamming open, footsteps running through the hall. There was chaos, confusion, and it was all happening just a few rooms away from where I stood, frozen in place. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and I almost jumped out of my skin. I pulled it out with trembling hands. I read the message twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My heart was still pounding in my ears as I looked out the window from the landing, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening outside. Through the glass, I saw the unmistakable sight of FBI agents in tactical gear. Black vests, helmets, and weapons drawn, moving swiftly across the yard, toward the front door. They were everywhere, swarming the house like they'd been waiting for this moment. The sight of them, so organized, so prepared, only deepened the panic building in my chest. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, feeling the weight of it all crash into me. I was supposed to be hiding, supposed to be safe in my room, and yet I was completely exposed. I heard more shouting downstairs, my dad's voice, frantic and desperate. "What is this? What are you doing here?" I don't understand. He was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the fear in his voice, just beneath the surface. The man I had trusted, the man who was supposed to protect me, was falling apart. I had a sick feeling in my stomach. The FBI was here because of him, because of everything he'd done. And now, everything he'd kept hidden from me, every lie, every secret was coming to light. But there was nothing I could do. I couldn't help him. I couldn't even go down there to face him. The message on my phone buzzed again. "Stay in your room. Do not open the door for anyone." I swallowed hard, biting back tears, my chest aching. The air felt too thick to breathe. I was trapped in my own house, and the walls felt like they were closing in. The agents were closing in on my dad, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Despite the chaos echoing through the house, I knew I had to stay where I was. I had no choice. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, to not let the fear take over. This was happening. There was no going back. My father had set all of this in motion, and now I was just trying to survive the fallout. I couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even him. I was still huddled against the wall, my chest tight, when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside my door. A few seconds later, there was a knock. My heart skipped. I didn't move. Another knock. This time, I heard someone call my name. "Tessa." "We need to talk." It was Agent Daniels. The sound of her voice was like a slap, a reminder that everything was spiraling out of control. I pushed myself to my feet and cracked the door open just a little, just enough to peek out. Agent Daniels was standing there, her expression serious, but her eyes were kind. Too kind, considering everything that had just happened. "Your father has been taken into custody," she said quietly. "I need you to stay calm. I know this is overwhelming, but you're safe now." I nodded, barely able to breathe. My mind was still reeling, but I could see through the window, my dad, Mark, being led outside by 2 agents, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was struggling, shouting something, but his voice was muffled by the distance. I could see the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes darted around, looking for a way out. But there was no escape now. I could barely hold it together. The man I had loved, the one I'd trusted above anyone else, was being taken away like a criminal. But this wasn't the man I knew. This wasn't the father I thought I had. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I stayed there, frozen in place. Watching, Agent Daniels stepped closer, lowering her voice. "We've gathered everything. The wiretap recordings, the bank transfers, the evidence from his operations. It's all there." She didn't need to say more. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. Fraud, identity theft, worse. My dad had been living a lie, and so had I. All these months, all the little things I'd brushed off. The way he'd asked for my social security number, my bank info, the questions he'd asked about my life. It was all leading up to this. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach turn, was the reason I was in this mess at all. "Your father had plans to use you as a scapegoat, Tessa," Agent Daniels said softly. "He was going to set you up to take the fall for everything." To cover up his crimes, I staggered back, feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream that this couldn't be true. But something in the pit of my stomach told me it wasn't a lie. The pieces were falling into place, and I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. Agent Daniels didn't stop there. She continued, her voice low and steady. "He was planning to kill you, Tessa. Make it look like a suicide. The perfect way to cover up his tracks and protect himself from the authorities. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Kill me? The words echoed in my mind, over and over until they blurred into a sickening blur of disbelief. My father had planned to kill me. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I had to stay strong. I had to survive this. "That's why I need you to listen carefully," Agent Daniels said, her tone turning more urgent. "Your father is a dangerous man, but you don't have to be afraid anymore. We're going to make sure he's held accountable for everything he's done." I nodded, too numb to say anything. But then Agent Daniels hesitated, and I could see the slight hesitation in her eyes. She didn't say anything for a moment, like she was weighing her words. "Melissa was working with us," she finally added. I blinked, confused. "What, Melissa?" I couldn't believe it. "You mean she knew?" Agent Daniels nodded. "Yes, Melissa has been working with us for months. She gave us the information we needed to bring Mark down. I wished I'd had the chance to thank her, to say something. But she was gone before I could find the words. I could barely process what she was saying. Melissa, my stepmother, had been helping the FBI. She'd been working with them, keeping everything from me. The woman I'd thought was just a cold, distant figure in my life had been on the other side, risking everything to stop my father. My mind spun as everything collided. The phone calls, the awkward silences, the odd way Melissa had acted over the past few months. It was all making sense now, but it still didn't feel real. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Relief? I ran a shaky hand through my hair, feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of the truth. But then something else crept in, something I hadn't expected. I was angry, so angry. Melissa wasn't perfect. Hell, she had barely even been a mother to me, but she had done what was right. She'd risked everything, her life, her safety, her marriage, to stop my dad from hurting me, from destroying everything. I thought about the way she'd acted the day of Thanksgiving, the way she'd kept glancing at the hallway, the way she'd tried to keep me from asking questions. She hadn't been cold. She'd been terrified. She'd been protecting me in her own way. I swallowed hard, the bitterness in my throat threatening to choke me. I didn't know how to feel about her anymore, but at least now I understood. And that was something. I looked out the window again, watching as my father was shoved into the back of an FBI van. I couldn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. "I'll let you process this," Agent Daniels said, her voice softening. "But we'll need your full cooperation moving forward." I nodded, but I didn't know if I could do it. My world had shattered, and all I could do now was watch the pieces fall. I was sitting in a sterile white room that smelled like bleach and bad decisions. The cold metal table in front of me felt like it was pressing into my ribs, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the door, the thick glass window in the wall, and the man on the other side. My father. He was sitting across from me now, hands cuffed to the table, his eyes locked onto mine like he was trying to figure me out. I knew what he saw. His daughter, the one he'd raised, the one who trusted him, but what he didn't know was that I could see him for who he really was now. A stranger, a monster, and I wasn't the little girl anymore, the one who'd clung to his every word. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low, almost pleading. "Tessa, you've got to understand. Everything I've done, it started out for you. For us. But in the end, I had to protect myself first. I couldn't let it all fall apart. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, and I hated it. I hated how his words still had the power to twist in my gut, to make me question everything I'd believed. But I wasn't the same person I used to be. I couldn't let him lie to me anymore. I shot back, my voice firm. Protect me? By using me as a scapegoat? By planning to have me killed? Do you really think I'm that stupid? His expression faltered, just for a second, but he quickly masked it with that same old, smooth facade. You don't understand, Tessa. You're too young to get it. All I wanted was to give you everything. The best life, the security you deserve. I felt a sickening twist in my stomach as his words hung in the air, like they could erase everything he'd done. But I saw through it. His love was just another manipulation, another lie to keep me under his control. He had never really cared about me. It was all about him. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. No, you don't get it. You lied to me. You used me. You didn't protect me. You destroyed me. And you were willing to sacrifice me just to save your own ass. He flinched at that, his jaw clenching. I saw the cracks forming in his perfect image, the image I'd held onto for so long. The man who had always been my protector, my hero. He was crumbling in front of me, and I couldn't help but feel a bitter satisfaction in that. His voice lowered. No longer the sweet, manipulative tone it used to be. I didn't have a choice, Tessa. I had to secure our wealth. You don't understand how things work at my level. I couldn't afford to be exposed. If the authorities found out about all the money laundering, the fraud, the shit we've been doing for years, it would have all been over. I had to keep it all under wraps. I wanted to throw something at him, scream in his face, but I stayed still, focusing on the one thing that kept me grounded. My strength. I wasn't the victim anymore. He had tried to break me, to control me, but I wasn't going to let him. Not now, not ever again. I shook my head slowly, almost disbelieving. And you thought the best way to secure our future was to kill me? My voice cracked, but I forced it back under control. You were willing to murder your own daughter, and you're sitting here telling me it was for my future? That's what you've been doing all these years, lying, scheming, playing me like a fool. Mark's face twisted. He didn't look like the man I'd once idolized. His eyes were cold now, like everything he'd ever done had been calculated. Like it was all just part of the game. I did what I had to do, Tessa. You don't get it. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. People like me, we don't get to make mistakes. I made sure everything was clean, that no one would ever know. You think I'm evil? I'm just trying to survive. I did survive. And you would have too, if you hadn't gotten in the way. I stared at him, my chest tightening. The man who had been my father wasn't here anymore. That person was gone. This man sitting in front of me wasn't a protector. He was a predator, and I had been his prey. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You never cared about me. You cared about yourself. You only saw me as a tool, a way to protect your precious empire. I could barely keep the disgust out of my voice. And you didn't even hesitate. You would have killed me to protect your own skin. For the first time, Mark didn't respond. His gaze flickered, a brief flash of guilt before it hardened into a mask of indifference again. That was when I knew. I wasn't the one being betrayed anymore. He was the one who had lost. The man I'd put on a pedestal had destroyed himself, and I didn't have to play along anymore. I turned to walk away, but then I stopped. I looked back at him one last time. "You're not my father anymore," I said, my voice steady now, filled with the kind of finality that burned in my chest. "You don't get to be that to me anymore. You're just a criminal, and I'm done being your victim." As I walked out, the door closing behind me, I realized something that hit harder than anything else. I wasn't a little girl anymore. I wasn't the scared daughter, clinging to the idea of family. I was in control. The courtroom felt suffocating, like the air was thicker than it should have been, heavy with judgment and waiting. I was sitting in the gallery, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, trying not to think about the man on trial, the man who was once my father, the man who had torn apart everything I'd ever believed about my life. My hands were shaking, but I hid it. I couldn't let anyone see how much I was falling apart inside. Mark's trial had finally started. The prosecutor was presenting the evidence, financial records that painted a picture of money laundering, bank transfers that showed how far his reach went, and recorded phone calls where he'd talked about his plans. It was damning. It was everything I had worked with the FBI to uncover. But it still felt unreal. Like I was watching someone else's life, someone else's nightmare unfolding in front of me. The prosecutor called his next witness, me. My heart stopped for a split second, and I could feel all the eyes in the room turn toward me. My breath caught in my throat. I stood up slowly, moving like I was underwater. Every step felt heavier than the last. I tried to stay calm, but my legs were unsteady, my hands cold. I walked to the stand, and as I sat down, I noticed the weight of the microphone, the feel of the wood under my palms. The room was silent, too silent. I could hear my heartbeat thumping in my ears. The prosecutor didn't waste time. "Tessa, can you tell the court what you know about your father's activities?" I swallowed hard. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I couldn't back down. I had to tell the truth, no matter how much it tore me apart to do it. He used me," I started, my voice shaky but steady enough to be heard. "He used my identity, my information, to cover up his crimes. He asked for my social security number, my bank accounts, my college schedule. I thought he was just being overprotective, but I didn't know what he was really doing with it." I paused, gathering myself, feeling the eyes of the jury on me. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I wasn't ready for the way my chest tightened as I spoke. The words felt like stones in my throat. "And then I found out he was planning to kill me," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "He was going to make it look like a suicide. So everyone would think it was my fault, that I was the one who screwed up. He was going to cover everything up, make sure he didn't get caught." There was a murmur from the gallery. I could feel the weight of every gaze, and for a moment I almost wanted to shrink back, to take it all back. But I couldn't. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him hurt me anymore. The defense attorney stood up, trying to regain control of the room. "Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay. There's no evidence to support her claim." The judge nodded, but the prosecutor was quick to counter. "Your Honor, the defendant's own words on recorded phone calls support her testimony. And we have the financial records that show he was using her to hide his tracks. This is not hearsay. This is the truth." The defense attorney sat down, but I could see the way he looked at me, like I was just a pawn in a game he was trying to win. I could feel his eyes trying to peel me open, but I didn't let it affect me. I couldn't afford to. Not now. After a few more questions, the prosecutor asked me something I wasn't prepared for. "Tessa, how did you feel when you found out what your father had planned?" I looked down at my hands, then back up at the jury, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt betrayed. I felt like my whole life had been a lie. The man I thought I knew wasn't the man I thought he was. I trusted him, and he was willing to let me die for it. I could see the jury listening, their expressions tense, Their faces softened with sympathy. But I didn't feel sorry for myself. Not anymore. I had to stand tall. I had to make sure everyone knew who Mark really was, even if it meant I had to tear myself apart to do it. When I finished my testimony and stepped down, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, but I didn't collapse. I didn't break. I had done what I needed to do. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The trial dragged on for a few more days. The defense tried to discredit everything, tried to paint me as a confused daughter who didn't understand what was really happening. But the evidence was overwhelming. The wiretaps, the bank records, the testimony from Mark's former associates. Everything stacked up against him. There was no escaping it. I watched as the jury deliberated. It felt like hours, but it was only a few minutes before they returned with their verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Johnson, guilty on all charges. The words hit me like a tidal wave. I sat back in my chair, trying to process them, but I couldn't. The truth had finally won. My father, my former father, was going to prison for the rest of his life. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. But there was something inside me, a tiny seed of power that grew in that moment. He was no longer in control. He couldn't hurt me anymore. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, and I could feel the weight of those words, heavy and final. But it wasn't over. Not for me. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I was a woman, and for the first time, I was free. As the courtroom cleared out, I stood tall, knowing that I had faced the worst and survived. And no matter what happened next, no matter where life took me, I'd never let anyone control me again. Months had passed since the trial, but it still felt like everything had happened only yesterday. I'd graduated from college with honors, something I never thought I'd achieve, not with everything hanging over me. But I'd done it. I'd survived. Now I was sitting in a small, quiet office, facing Agent Daniels, the woman who had helped me tear down the life I thought I knew. She smiled as she slid a folder across the desk to me. "We've been following your progress, Tessa. You've come a long way." I couldn't help the slight smile that tugged at the corner of my lips. "I couldn't have done it without you," she nodded, the look in her eyes both professional and warm. "I'm glad we could help. But now I'm offering you a chance to help us." A real chance. I felt my stomach flip, like I was falling off a cliff and wasn't sure if I'd hit the ground. "What do you mean?" Agent Daniels leaned back, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "We have an opening in the FBI's Special Investigations Division. It's not easy, but you've proven yourself. You're exactly the kind of person we need on the inside." I stared at her, the words swirling in my mind. This was it. The chance I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to take everything I'd learned, the darkness, the betrayal, and turn it into something good. Something that could help people. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "I still don't know who I am without all this." "Without the lies, you're more than the past, Tessa," she said gently. "You're someone who's lived through it. Someone who understands the damage that can be done when people manipulate others for their own gain. That's who you are now. And that's what makes you the perfect fit for this job." I let the weight of her words settle in, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear, something that felt like purpose. "What do I need to do?" I asked, the words coming out with more confidence than I felt. She slid the folder closer, opening it to reveal the next steps. "You start by training. The next phase won't be easy, but I think you're ready." As I glanced over the papers in front of me, I could almost hear the echoes of everything I had lost. My father, the trust I'd had in him, the family I thought I had. But there was something else too. I wasn't the same person I was a year ago. I had a new strength, a new understanding of what it meant to protect others. I wasn't just going to survive anymore. I was going to fight. I looked back up at Agent Daniels, meeting her gaze squarely. "I'm in," she smiled, and I saw a flicker of pride in her eyes. "Good. We're lucky to have you." As I walked out of her office, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had walked through hell, and now I was ready to fight back. Ready to prevent the same thing from happening to someone else. Everything I'd lost, my father, my innocence, the life I thought I would have, was gone. But in its place, I'd found something stronger. The woman I was becoming. a woman who was ready to take on whatever came next. And this time, I wasn't running away. I was running towards something that mattered. I was ready to fight for justice in my own way, ready to make sure no one else had to face the kind of betrayal I had. This was my new beginning, and it felt like freedom, true freedom.